Do you know what happens when a man tears a waitress's uniform in front of 300 witnesses? The question cut through the ballroom a heartbeat before the sound of ripping fabric did. A wine glass spun across the marble floor. A silver serving tray clattered against a chair leg. Ava Brooks's black apron twisted in Nathan Pierce's fist as her name tag flew from her chest and skidded beneath a table draped in white linen. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Not the donors. Not the managers. Not even the musicians. Silence settled over the room like a lid being lowered onto a coffin. 3 hours earlier, Ava had stood alone in the employee locker room, smoothing the wrinkles from her uniform. The fabric was old. She had repaired the same seam twice with thread bought from a dollar store. Her reflection in the metal locker showed a woman who looked older than 30. Not because of age. Because grief had weight. Responsibility had weight. Debt had weight. And she carried all three. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother. A blurry photo of a half-finished puzzle. One word beneath it. Finished. Ava smiled despite herself. He rarely texted. She saved the picture before slipping the old phone into her apron pocket. Tonight mattered. The charity gala brought in enough tips to cover 2 months of his therapy sessions. That thought followed her through the towering hotel ballroom, where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls and wealthy guests spoke softly about generosity, while drinking champagne worth more than her weekly groceries. Ava knew how to disappear. Years in service had taught her that. She moved between tables carrying trays and refilling glasses while conversations flowed around her as if she were furniture. But disappearing also taught her something else. People revealed secrets when they believed no one important was watching. 20 minutes before the incident, she noticed Nathan Pierce standing beside a display of donation envelopes. Humanitarian of the Year. That was what tonight's program called him. The room adored him. Cameras adored him. Yet Ava watched him switch pens after signing a pledge card. A strange detail. Most people would never notice. Ava did. She always noticed things. The second pen left a smear of bright blue ink across his thumb. Later she saw the same blue mark on the corner of a sealed donation envelope. Small. Meaningless, probably. Except Nathan glanced around before sliding the envelope beneath a stack of folders. The movement was quick. Hidden. Wrong. She stored the detail away without knowing why. Then the Mafia boss's daughter dropped her framed painting during the auction preview. Ava reacted before thinking. She lunged forward and caught the frame against her chest. The painting survived. Nathan's wine did not. Red liquid splashed across his sleeve. The room gasped. Nathan looked down, then up. His smile arrived first. Polite, controlled, deadly. Some people, he said softly enough for nearby guests to lean closer, simply don't belong around expensive things. Laughter flickered around the table. Thin, nervous. Ava opened her mouth to apologize. Instead, she saw something beneath Nathan's chair. Her name tag had landed beside a cream-colored envelope marked by a streak of bright blue ink identical to the stain on his thumb. And for the first time that night, someone else noticed it too. Across the ballroom, the Mafia boss stopped listening to the conversation in front of him and looked directly at the envelope. The envelope sat on the floor for less than 3 seconds before a polished black dress shoe slid over it. Nathan Pierce never bent down. He never looked at it directly. Yet somehow the cream-colored envelope disappeared beneath the edge of his jacket as smoothly as a magician palming a card. Ava saw it. The Mafia boss saw her see it. That was the moment the room changed. Not loudly, quietly. Danger rarely announced itself in places like this. It smiled. It adjusted its cufflinks. It thanked people for their generosity. "I believe this young woman owes you an apology, Mr. Pierce," the event manager said, appearing almost instantly at Nathan's side. The man wore a silver tie and the strained expression of someone protecting a paycheck. Nathan dabbed wine from his sleeve with a linen napkin. "It was an accident," he said pleasantly. "These things happen." The words sounded merciful. His eyes did not. Ava had heard that tone before. It was the tone people used when they wanted witnesses to remember how kind they had been. Around them, conversations slowly resumed. Glasses clinked. A violinist resumed playing. Yet the silence remained underneath everything, stretched tight as wire. Ava crouched and retrieved her fallen name tag. One corner had cracked. The blue ink stain on the back seemed darker now. She slipped it into her apron pocket before anyone noticed. "Come with me," the manager said. Not a request. The service corridor behind the ballroom smelled faintly of bleach and burnt coffee. Industrial dishwashers roared behind swinging kitchen doors. Steam drifted across fluorescent lights. The ordinary sounds should have been comforting. Instead, they made Ava feel isolated, as though the gala existed on another planet. The manager handed her a printed incident form. "Sign it." Ava scanned the page. Her stomach tightened. The statement claimed she had collided with Nathan Pierce while carrying a tray. That wasn't what happened. "This says I approached his table. It's a standard report. It's false." His smile thinned. "Ava, sometimes the fastest way through a problem is straight through it." She looked again. Someone had already typed a settlement amount into the bottom section. $5,000. Her pulse stumbled. $5,000 would cover months of therapy for her brother. Months. Yet the form had been printed at 8:11 p.m. The incident happened at 8:17. Ava checked twice. The timestamp didn't change. How was this printed 6 minutes before it happened? She asked quietly. The manager's expression froze for half a heartbeat. Then it returned. Clerical error. Ava folded the paper. "I'm not signing." For the first time, the smile disappeared completely. 10 minutes later, she stood alone beside a stainless steel prep counter, twisting a damp towel between her hands. Her old phone vibrated inside her pocket. A bank alert. Past due notice. She deleted it without opening the full message. Another vibration followed immediately. Unknown number. No voicemail. Just a text. 3 words. "Take the money." Ava stared at the screen. The message had arrived at 8:19 p.m., 2 minutes after the incident. Whoever sent it knew exactly what had happened. Across the hotel, in a private lounge overlooking the ballroom, the Mafia boss examined a photograph on his phone. Not of Ava. Not of Nathan. Of the incident report his attorney had quietly acquired. He enlarged the timestamp. 8:11 p.m. Then he asked a single question. Who authorized this form? Nobody answered immediately. Back downstairs, Ava slipped the folded report into her apron beside the damaged name tag. The paper shifted just enough for her to notice something she had missed before. At the bottom of the page, beneath the manager's signature, was a billing code linked to a table number. Table 12. Nathan Pierce had spent the entire evening seated at table 21. Table 21. Ava stared at the number until the ink blurred slightly beneath the fluorescent lights. The kitchen doors swung open and shut behind her, releasing bursts of heat, steam, and the smell of garlic butter, but none of it reached her. All she could see was the receipt in her hand. Table 12. The wrong table. Not a typo. Not a misplaced digit. Something else. Something deliberate. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it behind the cracked plastic sleeve of her damaged name tag. The 2 pieces felt connected now, though she couldn't yet explain why. You're still here. The manager's voice appeared behind her. Ava turned. His smile arrived a second later. Too late, like a mask being lifted back into place. I was just finishing my shift. Good. He adjusted his silver tie. Honestly, Ava, I'd hate to see you make this harder than it needs to be. His tone remained gentle, concerned, almost fatherly. Mr. Pierce is a very generous man. Sometimes people misunderstand situations when emotions get involved. His eyes flicked briefly toward her body, toward the torn seam near her shoulder. Especially after embarrassing moments. There it was. Not an accusation. Not directly. Just a reminder that people would always believe a respected donor before a plus-size waitress with a ripped uniform. Ava felt the sting. Anyway, the form listed the wrong table. The manager's expression didn't change. Did it? Mr. Pierce sat at 21. I'm sure there's an explanation. What is it? For a second, he simply looked at her. Then he laughed softly. You always notice little things, don't you? The answer never came. He walked away before she could ask again. That bothered her more than if he'd argued. Across the hotel, the ballroom had shifted into the auction portion of the evening. Crystal chandeliers reflected gold light across polished marble. Wealth moved differently in rooms like this. Slower, more confidently. The Mafia boss remained seated near the rear of the room, one hand resting against the arm of his chair. He appeared relaxed, detached, but his eyes moved. Not constantly, precisely. The event manager crossed the room carrying a tablet. Nathan Pierce accepted a congratulatory handshake from a television reporter. The Mafia boss watched both men for exactly 3 seconds each. Then he lowered his gaze to something much smaller. A photograph on his phone. The incident report. Table 12. He enlarged the image again. A quiet knock interrupted him. His attorney stepped closer. You asked who authorized the report. And the system says Nathan Pierce did. The attorney paused. 31 minutes before the incident. Silence. The Mafia boss leaned back slightly. Not surprise. Calculation. Can donors create disciplinary reports? No. Another pause. Only senior management. The Mafia boss looked toward the event manager. Nothing in his face changed. But his attorney knew him well enough to recognize danger when it became still. Meanwhile, Ava returned to the ballroom carrying a tray of sparkling water. Her shoulder ached where the uniform had torn. She moved carefully between tables, forcing herself not to look toward Nathan. Then she heard a familiar notification sound. 2 short tones. Soft, almost hidden beneath the music. Her stomach tightened instantly. She knew that sound. The old accounting software from her university internship used the same alert whenever a restricted ledger was opened remotely. The noise came from Nathan's table. Ava kept walking, kept serving, kept her expression neutral, but she counted the seconds. 5, 10, 15. Nathan glanced beneath the table. 20 seconds later, he slid a phone back into his jacket pocket. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Ava did. Because when he withdrew his hand, there was a streak of bright blue ink across his thumb again. The same color as the stain on her name tag. The same color as the envelope. The same color printed beside the authorization code on the incident report. And this time, she noticed something else. The authorization number ended with 2112. Nathan's hotel suite number was 2112.
Suite 2112.
The number followed Ava through the next 40 minutes like a splinter beneath the skin. She kept seeing it everywhere. On the authorization code. In her memory of the incident report. In the back of her mind while she carried trays through rooms lined with crystal and gold. By 10 o'clock, the auction had ended and the highest-tier donors had moved into a private dining salon on the hotel's 42nd floor. The room overlooked Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city glittered like scattered diamonds. Inside, waiters moved silently across thick carpet while men in tailored suits discussed philanthropy over $1,200 bottles of Bordeaux. Ava wasn't supposed to be there anymore. Employees involved in incidents were usually removed from VIP service. Yet somehow her name remained on the assignment list. Another detail that didn't fit. Another thing she stored away. She entered carrying a silver coffee service balanced carefully on one arm. Conversations softened as she approached. Not stopped. Softened. The way wealthy people lowered their voices around something unpleasant. A board member named Eleanor Whitmore sat near the center of the table wearing pearls that probably cost more than Ava's apartment. She glanced at the torn shoulder seam in Ava's uniform and offered a sympathetic smile that somehow felt worse than open cruelty. Still working tonight? Eleanor asked. That shows admirable resilience. The word landed like a pin. Resilience. As if humiliation were a character-building exercise. Ava poured coffee. Without responding. You know, Eleanor continued lightly, sometimes misunderstandings grow larger when people become emotionally attached to them. Several guests nodded. Not because they agreed. Because Eleanor had spoken. Mr. Pierce has donated millions to children in need. Another donor added. One unfortunate moment shouldn't define a person's legacy. There it was. The test. Not shouted. Not forced. An invitation to surrender quietly. Ava placed a cup onto a saucer. The china never rattled. I agree, she said calmly. One moment shouldn't define anyone. The room relaxed slightly, until she added, that's why reports should be accurate. Silence returned. Small. Sharp. Nathan Pierce looked up from his wine glass. For the first time all evening, his smile hesitated. Only briefly. Then it returned. A reasonable point, he said pleasantly. Although accuracy requires context. His voice was smooth as polished stone. And context requires experience. His gaze drifted toward her apron, toward her position, toward everything she wasn't. Sometimes people misunderstand systems they aren't part of. Several guests smiled into their drinks. The insult was elegant enough to pass for conversation. Ava felt heat rise in her cheeks, not because she was embarrassed, because she recognized what he was doing, making her seem emotional, unqualified, small. Maybe, she replied, but numbers don't usually misunderstand themselves. The smile vanished completely this time, only for a second, yet it was enough. Across the room, seated near the windows, the Mafia boss watched the exchange without interrupting. Most people focused on words. He watched reactions. Eleanor looked annoyed. The manager looked nervous. Nathan looked controlled. Too controlled. Like a man constantly checking the position of pieces on a chessboard. Then a server approached Ava carrying a folder. Human Resources needs your signature downstairs. The young man sounded uncomfortable. Ava opened the folder. Another statement. Another version of events. This one claimed she voluntarily accepted compensation and admitted fault. Attached to the back was a cashier's receipt authorizing a $5,000 transfer. The transfer time read 8:03 p.m. 14 minutes before the incident. Several people at the table watched her, waiting, measuring, seeing whether she would take the money. Ava folded the document once, then placed it carefully on the center of the table where everyone could see the timestamp. I'm not signing something that happened before it happened. Nobody spoke. Not immediately. Nathan's fingers tightened around his glass. Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. Ava was. So was the Mafia boss. The manager quickly stepped forward and removed the paperwork. Administrative error, he said. Of course. He laughed. Too fast. Too loud. The room moved on. Conversations resumed. Wine flowed again. The moment appeared finished. Controlled. Buried. Yet as the manager gathered the papers, one sheet slipped halfway free. Just enough for Ava to see the authorization signature at the bottom. It wasn't Nathan Pierce's name. It belonged to someone else entirely. Someone whose last name matched the hotel's head of security. The head of security. Ava stood motionless long after the manager had gathered the papers and hurried away. Around her, crystal glasses chimed softly. Laughter drifted across the private dining room. The city glowed beyond the windows. Yet all she could hear was the name forming silently in her mind. Daniel Mercer. Head of security. The man responsible for cameras, access logs, incident reports. The man everyone trusted. The man whose signature had appeared beneath a document created before the incident itself. A server brushed past her shoulder and nearly apologized before noticing who she was. Then he simply looked away. Ava had experienced that look before. The look people gave when they sensed someone falling out of favor. She returned the empty coffee tray to the service station and slipped into a narrow corridor leading toward the administrative offices. Her pulse beat steadily. Not fast. Steady. The way it always did when pieces started fitting together. The security office sat behind a frosted glass door near the freight elevators. Most employees avoided the area. Tonight it stood slightly open. Just enough. Ava wasn't looking for trouble. She told herself that twice. Then she saw the cardboard archive box sitting beside a trash bin. The lid hung open. Inside were discarded event documents, shift logs, Vendor receipts. Security reports. She should have kept walking. Instead, she stopped. One page near the top caught her eye immediately. Different ink. Different handwriting. Ava lifted the sheet carefully. It was the service roster for the evening. Her name appeared twice. Once in black ink assigned to ballroom service. Once in blue ink assigning her to the private donor corridor at 8:15 p.m. The second entry had been added later. She knew because the blue ink bled differently into the paper fibers. Someone had rewritten her location after the fact. Looking for something? Ava nearly dropped the page. Daniel Mercer stood at the end of the hallway. Tall, broad, calm. His suit jacket hung open. His expression remained polite. Too polite. I was returning a tray, Ava said. And reading confidential security records? His smile never reached his eyes. You should be careful. People might misunderstand what you're doing. There was that word again. Misunderstand. Everyone kept using it. Ava folded the paper once. Why was my assignment changed? Daniel's gaze flicked toward the document. Administrative corrections happen. After the event? You'd be surprised how often paperwork gets messy. His tone remained reasonable, professional, yet something felt rehearsed, like a script performed too many times. Daniel stepped closer. You seem determined to create problems where none exist. Ava met his eyes. Then why does everyone keep fixing paperwork that was supposedly correct the first time? For the first time, silence stretched between them. Long enough to feel dangerous. Daniel finally smiled again. Go home, Ava. Soft, gentle, cold. Take the settlement. Let tonight end. He walked away before she could answer. 5 minutes later, Ava found herself standing inside a service elevator with her damaged name tag in one hand and the altered roster in the other. The doors opened unexpectedly on the executive level. Someone stepped inside before she could react. The Mafia boss. Neither spoke. The elevator descended. 30 floors. 29. 28. Ava stared ahead. Then she extended the folded roster toward him. He looked at the paper, then at her, then back at the paper. He took it, said nothing. When the elevator reached the lobby, the doors opened. He remained standing inside, reading. His eyes stopped on the blue ink correction, stopped again on the timestamp beside it. And for the first time that night, he remembered who had personally recommended Daniel Mercer for the position 3 years ago. Nathan Pierce. The elevator doors closed between them with a soft metallic sigh. Ava never saw what happened after that. She walked out into the cold Manhattan night with her torn uniform hidden beneath her coat and her old phone vibrating against her hip. The city smelled like rain and car exhaust. Yellow taxis rolled through puddles reflecting neon signs. By the time she reached her apartment in Queens, midnight had already passed. Her younger brother had fallen asleep on the couch with the television still glowing blue across the room. A half-finished puzzle sat on the coffee table. One piece missing from the center. Ava stood there for a moment looking at him. Looking at the unpaid hospital invoice pinned beneath a refrigerator magnet. Looking at the stack of envelopes she hadn't opened because she already knew what they contained. Final notices. Payment reminders. Warnings disguised as polite letters. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She deleted it without reading. Then she sat at the kitchen table and carefully spread out everything she had saved. The damaged name tag. The altered roster. The incident report. The receipt. She wasn't trying to get rich. She wasn't trying to sue anyone. She wasn't even trying to keep her job anymore. She just wanted one thing. For someone to stop rewriting reality and expecting everyone else to call it truth. Across the city, in a private office high above the river, the Mafia boss sat alone behind a dark walnut desk. The altered roster remained open in front of him. So did 3 personnel files. Daniel Mercer, head of security, 7 years with the hotel. No complaints. No disciplinary actions. Recommended personally by Nathan Pierce. He turned another page. Then another. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Intentional. His attorney entered without speaking and placed a flash drive on the desk. The access logs. The Mafia boss nodded once. The attorney left. The flash drive contained every electronic keycard entry from the evening. Thousands of records. Most people would have searched for names. He searched for time. 8:03 p.m. The receipt authorization. 8:11 p.m. The incident report. 8:17 p.m. The public humiliation. He stared at the sequence. Something bothered him. Not what happened. The order in which it happened. Then he found it. At 7:58 p.m., 19 minutes before the incident, Daniel Mercer's master key card accessed a records room on the executive floor. At 8:01 p.m., another card entered the same room. Nathan Pierce's guest credential. The two men remained inside for exactly 6 minutes. At 8:07 p.m., they left. At 8:11 p.m., the incident report was created. Silence. The Mafia boss leaned back. Most lies fell apart because people focused on the story. He preferred timelines. Timelines didn't panic. Timelines didn't forget. His phone rang. One call. One person. "Get me the archived donor records," he said. "All of them." He ended the call before hearing a response. 30 minutes later, another file arrived. This one older. Much older. Children's grant approvals. Medical assistance awards. Scholarship distributions. Hundreds of names. Thousands of pages. The kind of paperwork nobody examined after signing. He skimmed, then stopped. A child's medical grant approved 3 years ago. The beneficiary was listed as deceased 6 months before the approval date. Another file. Same pattern. Another. And another. Small amounts. Different names. Different years. The money wasn't disappearing in one large theft. It was bleeding slowly, quietly, hidden among tragedies nobody would question. The room felt colder. He looked again at the personnel file he had trusted for years. Daniel Mercer. Then at the donor records linked repeatedly to Nathan Pierce. His gaze drifted toward the photograph his daughter had drawn earlier that week. Child standing between two adults holding hands. Protection. Trust. The things people assumed were simple. His phone vibrated against the desk. A new report from accounting. One sentence highlighted in yellow. The same inactive children's accounts had been flagged once before. 3 years ago. The complaint had been dismissed by the chairman of the Charity Oversight Board. Nathan Pierce. The Mafia boss stared at the name for a long time. Then he looked at Ava's damaged name tag lying beside the altered roster and realized something that settled heavily into his chest. The waitress everyone dismissed had noticed the first crack in a system he had been standing inside for years without seeing. The waitress everyone dismissed had noticed the first crack in a system he had been standing inside for years without seeing. The realization lingered long after midnight. By sunrise, the city had begun moving again. Delivery trucks rattled through narrow streets. Coffee carts released clouds of steam into the cold air. Somewhere beneath it all, people who believed themselves untouchable woke up expecting another ordinary day. Nathan Pierce was one of them. At 10:30 that morning, he arrived at the Charity Foundation's executive offices wearing a navy suit and a smile practiced over decades. Cameras loved him. Board members trusted him. The receptionist greeted him by name. Nothing about the morning suggested danger, which was exactly how the Mafia boss wanted it. Ava arrived 15 minutes later through a side entrance. Her shoulder seam had been repaired with dark thread that didn't quite match the uniform. The damaged name tag remained clipped to her apron. She hated wearing it, refused to replace it, not because it looked professional, because it reminded her that someone had tried to erase her and failed. She entered a conference room overlooking the river. A long walnut table stretched through the center. Water glasses sat untouched at each seat. One folder rested in front of every board member. All identical. All closed. The only sound came from the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. The Mafia boss stood near the windows, hands in his pockets. Expression unreadable. Nathan smiled when he saw him. "I wasn't aware we had a special meeting scheduled." "Now you are," the Mafia boss replied. "Nothing else." Nathan laughed lightly. Fair enough. The meeting began. Financial reports, grant summaries, routine discussion, boring on purpose. The trap wasn't hidden. It was disguised as normal. Ava remained near the sidewall serving coffee. Invisible again. The role everyone expected her to play. Halfway through the meeting, the Mafia boss opened one of the folders. A quick question. His voice remained calm. Who authorized the revised donor transfer forms last quarter? A board member answered immediately. Nathan oversees final approval. Nathan nodded confidently. Standard procedure. Of course. Silence followed. Small. Deliberate. The Mafia boss turned a page. Then perhaps you can help me understand something. He slid a document across the table. Not dramatically. Not accusingly. Just enough for everyone to see it. The altered service roster. Nathan glanced down. His expression didn't change, but his right hand stopped moving. I'm not sure what this has to do with donor transfers. Maybe nothing. The Mafia boss looked toward Ava. Miss Brooks. Every head in the room turned. Nathan's smile tightened. Ava stepped forward. Not because she wanted attention, because she remembered something nobody else had. The blue ink, she said quietly. Everyone keeps talking about signatures. Nobody talks about the pen. Confusion flickered across several faces. Ava continued. The corrections on the roster. The authorization code. The incident report. Same ink. Nathan laughed. Too quickly. That's hardly evidence. No, Ava agreed. But this is strange. She looked directly at him. You signed 3 documents with your right hand that night. Nathan nodded. And polished wood. Nobody touched it. The sound seemed impossibly loud. Nathan reached for his water glass instead. His hand missed the stem on the first attempt. Tiny. Barely noticeable. Unless someone was watching closely. The Mafia boss was. So were several board members now. Nathan finally found his smile again. Perhaps your employee has become overly invested in office gossip. The words sounded polished. Reasonable. Yet the room felt different. Ava saw it. Corridor. Timestamp. 7:58 p.m. The night of the gala. Daniel Mercer entered first using his master keycard. 6 minutes later, Nathan Pierce stepped through the same door. The footage contained no audio. It didn't need any. Everyone watched the 2 men disappear into the records room. Then watched them emerge carrying folders they hadn't entered with. Nathan shifted in his chair. That proves nothing. His voice sounded thinner now. You're right, said the Mafia boss. Keep watching. The second file opened. This one wasn't surveillance footage. It was recovered system activity from the donor database. Login records, edits, deleted entries, account. The moment that mattered most to Ava happened far away from cameras. It happened in the same ballroom where her uniform had been torn. 3 months later, the chandeliers still hung above polished marble. The tables still wore white linen. The room looked exactly the same, which somehow made it feel completely different. Employees stood together near the stage. Donors filled the seats. Members of the new charity board sat in the front row. Ava almost hadn't come. She still disliked attention. Still felt more comfortable carrying trays than standing beneath spotlights. But this time she wasn't wearing the damaged uniform. She wore a navy blazer with her name embroidered over the pocket. Not waitress. Not service staff. Operations coordinator. The title still felt strange. The applause began before she reached the stage. Ava stopped walking for a second. Not because she wanted the attention. Because she didn't know what to do with it. The Mafia boss stood nearby. He watched the room instead of the spotlight. He noticed who stood first. Who clapped hardest. Who looked ashamed. Some lessons had arrived late. He intended to remember them. The chairman of the new board cleared his throat. Before we begin, he said, there is something that should have happened months ago. He turned toward Ava. Miss Brooks, we owe you an apology. No excuses followed. No explanations. No attempts to soften responsibility. Just the truth. Public. Clear. Final. Ava felt something loosen inside her chest that she hadn't realized she was carrying. Then the chairman handed her a framed document. Inside was a corrected official record of the incident investigation. Her name appeared on the first page. Not as a problem, not as an employee at fault, as the reporting witness whose actions exposed the fraud. Her name, written correctly, preserved permanently. The applause returned. This time she let herself hear it. After the ceremony, people slowly drifted away. The ballroom emptied. Workers folded linens. Chairs scraped softly across marble floors. Outside, evening settled over Manhattan. Ava remained behind near the stage. A familiar object rested on a small table beside her. The old, damaged name tag. The cracked plastic had been preserved inside a glass frame. Months earlier it had been lying beneath a table while people laughed. Now it sat beneath a brass plaque. The plaque read, the detail everyone else ignored. The Mafia boss approached quietly. For a moment neither spoke. Then he looked at the framed badge. I almost missed it. Ava smiled faintly. A lot of people did. He nodded. Not anymore. Through the ballroom windows, city lights flickered to life one by one. Somewhere in Queens, her brother was waiting for her with takeout Chinese food and a half-finished puzzle. The hospital bills were paid. The legal protections were in place. The charity had been rebuilt. Not with promises, with safeguards, with audits, with people who finally understood that invisible people often see the most. Ava picked up her old phone before leaving. She still kept it, cracked screen and all. Some things were worth remembering. At the door, she paused and looked back once more at the framed name tag. Then she smiled and said quietly, it was never about being believed first. It was about making sure the truth survived long enough to be heard. The Mafia boss watched her walk into the lighted hallway and found himself unable to answer, because for the first time in a very long time, the truth had defeated power, and the woman everyone overlooked had finally been heard.